The difference showed most clearly in qualifying. Earlier in the year, Piastri had the edge on Saturdays, outqualifying Norris 8 times in the opening stretch. But post-upgrade, that margin began to fade. Not because Oscar lost speed, but because the window where the car behaved how he needed it to had narrowed. In Q1 and Q2, he was still clinical. But in Q3, with low fuel, maximum power, and track evolution at its peak, the balance often shifted out of reach. And in Formula One, a tenth lost in confidence is 2 tenths lost on the stopwatch. The race pace told a subtler story. In clean air, Piastri remained one of the most consistent drivers on the grid. His tire management was elite, especially in high-deg circuits like Qatar and Coda. But race strategy rarely gave him that clean air. Time and again, he was boxed into traffic, called in a lap late, asked to undercut with colder tires. Meanwhile, Norris was given the undercut, the free air, the aggressive call. Over time, that's not just a strategic imbalance, it becomes a psychological weight. Every lap feels like damage control rather than opportunity. And yet, Oscar never cracked. He adapted, began modifying his entry lines to account for front-end instability, worked with his engineers to isolate corner-specific rake issues, even changed his throttle mapping mid-stint to control the rear axle under acceleration. He wasn't driving around the problem, he was driving through it. That kind of technical resilience is rare, especially for someone in only his second full season of Formula One. This is why Aston Martin is watching, not just because of the points, but because Piastri has demonstrated something more valuable: adaptability under imbalance. He's taken a car drifting away from his strengths, reshaped his approach, and still delivered results. When engineers see that, they don't see a driver surviving, they see a leader, a future team anchor. And in a paddock planning for 2026 and beyond, those traits are now worth more than pole positions. The numbers are deceiving. 1 point between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris sounds like a close fight, an internal duel decided over details. But the truth behind that statistic tells a more complicated story. Oscar led for most of the season through merit and mechanical control. Yet now, after months of strategic misalignment and on-track sacrifice, he finds himself behind. Not because he lost performance, but because the system around him slowly pulled its support away. That single point isn't just a gap. It's a signal, a warning that trust inside McLaren may no longer be evenly split. In high-performance environments, confidence isn't abstract, it's measurable. It's pit priority, tire choice, state of flow, and most crucially, timing. When a driver feels backed, he attacks with freedom. When he doesn't, every lap becomes cautious. Oscar Piastri, despite the trend, has kept his head down. No outbursts, no coded messages. But beneath the surface, the psychological cost is real. He's had to drive not just with intensity, but with restraint. Playing the team game, letting others through, holding station when instinct screamed otherwise. That kind of restraint becomes heavy. It erodes clarity. Piastri now races knowing that pace alone may not decide the outcome. That team orders can overwrite qualifying. That pit stops can be shaped by brand politics, not racing logic. And when a driver senses that, he begins to think differently. Less about sector deltas, more about long-term moves, more about future garages. Because a driver's best years are finite. And being second on the call sheet when your data says you're first is the fastest way to lose faith. And this is what Aston Martin is counting on. They see a competitor who's still delivering under pressure, who's absorbed the politics, the preference, the subtle sidelining, and kept pushing. That makes him dangerous, not just as a driver, but as a decision maker. Because when the time comes to sign a deal or trigger an exit clause, Oscar won't act emotionally. He'll act surgically, quietly, the same way he races. And McLaren may not see it coming until the signature is dry. Internally, the cost is starting to show. Engineers have begun shifting focus, not in allegiance but in output. Conversations lean toward Norris's race strategy. Data briefs favor his preferred setups. Piastri's side of the garage still works at full tilt, but the energy has changed. In elite motorsport, you can feel when momentum leaves a corner. And right now, Piastri's momentum is being held back not by rivals, but by decisions above the cockpit. The fundamental flaw wasn't just performance, it was inconsistency. In races like Silverstone, the car looked alive on Friday, then vanished on Sunday. In Austria, it qualified on the front row, then slid backwards under load. This unpredictability created a setup paralysis inside Ferrari. Engineers became reactive, chasing balance that never held beyond Sector 1. And Leclerc, for all his talent, was left driving a machine that never gave him the same reading twice. In modern Formula One, where margins are measured in tenths, that's the difference between victory and irrelevance. Despite that, Leclerc kept pushing. He began working deeper with the simulator team, requested specific tire tests, even adjusted his off-track training to focus on physical compensation for the car's instability. No one inside Ferrari questions his commitment. If anything, they admire it. But at this level, effort alone isn't enough. And that's where the frustration grows. Leclerc did everything right, and the machinery let him down. Again, this is precisely why Aston Martin sees an opening. They're building a car with Adrian Newey. They're designing a power unit with Honda that prioritizes reliability and agility. They're building a team around race execution, not just horsepower. And what they need is a driver who can lead without ego. One who has been forged in pressure, but hasn't lost faith in process. Charles Leclerc checks every box. He's fast, mature, politically clean, and hungry, dangerously hungry for a project that respects his ceiling. There's a weight that comes with loyalty. Charles Leclerc has carried it longer than most drivers would dare. Since 2019, he has been Ferrari's flag bearer. Through failed strategies, underdeveloped chassis, and public disappointment, he stayed. He defended the team when critics circled. He embraced the pressure when others would have demanded exits. But loyalty in Formula One cannot outrun reality. And the reality in 2025 is painful. Ferrari gave him a car that couldn't win again. The consequence of that failure is not just lost points or missed podiums. It's erosion of belief, of momentum, of identity. Leclerc began this season knowing the title was a long shot. But he hoped for race wins, for a car that could fight on Sundays, for a trajectory that matched his prime. Instead, he has been handed a machine that flatters in practice but fades in battle. Week after week, he steps into a car that leaves him exposed. And now, for the first time in years, silence has replaced optimism in his voice. Inside the paddock, the whispers have turned into quiet nods. Rival engineers and former drivers see it clearly. Leclerc is driving like a man boxed in. No dramatic outbursts, no politics, but his body language says everything. The tension in debriefs, the longer stares at data screens, the way he walks past reporters with calm, clipped answers. These are not signs of frustration. They are signs of fatigue. And fatigue in elite sport is always the last warning before something breaks. For Ferrari, that something could be their future. Because Leclerc is not just a fast driver, he is a franchise figure, a proven race winner, a marketing cornerstone. And more importantly, he's one of the few drivers who still commands trust from fans across both red and neutral garages. If he leaves not out of anger, but out of quiet resignation, the damage to Ferrari will be generational. They won't just lose speed, they'll lose identity. Meanwhile, Aston Martin watches. They don't need Leclerc tomorrow. They need him in 2027, when Alonso steps away and the next technical cycle begins. And from their perspective, this slow implosion at Ferrari is perfect. It gives them time to court him subtly, to show him a project with order, direction, and engineering discipline, to promise not glory but structure. And after years of chaos, that promise might be what Leclerc values most. So now the consequence is no longer about standings. It's about credibility. Ferrari has 4 races left to prove they still know how to build around a world-class driver. That they're not just hoping for results, but earning them. Because if they fail to deliver again, then Charles Leclerc's final act in red may not be a title fight. It may be a quiet, dignified goodbye.